So far we have seen the linear gradient with 2 colors and linear gradient with 3 colors. In this video we are building the material for square gradient and radial gradient. First, let's take a look at the finished product. These are our world actors with square gradient on the left. Below it we have the square gradient with 3 colors. We have the radial gradient on the right. Below it we have different versions of the radial gradient. They're both in the user interface material domain. We can see the real application on our buttons here on the widget. We have the square gradient, radial gradient, the 3-color square gradient, and the different kinds of radial gradient that we are building. Now that you know what this video is going to be about, let's get started. Okay, so let's pull up our content drawer and we will create a new material for our square gradient. Now inside this file, we want to change our material domain from surface to user interface, and let's create two new colors which are vector parameters. You can hold V and click twice for two vector parameters. Click F2 to rename them as color A and color B. Let's also quickly set the color yellow and lime green. Cool. Now we will use the text coord node to build our UV map. Let's find some empty space and search for text coord. Now remember, text coord gives both our UV values in the form of a vector. So when we use the subtract node, both our U and V values get affected. So we are subtracting 0.5 and the center is now at 0, 0. Next we will use the abs node to get the absolute values. Perfect. Now all our negative values are gone. Now for square gradient, we want the value that is higher between U and V. So Unreal provides a max node, but max node accepts two parameters and we only have one. So for this purpose, we will need to use our mask to fetch our individual U and V values. We will duplicate this and from the drop down, select R for our U value and select G for our V value. Now we can insert these pins to our max node. Perfect. Now we just have to multiply this value to 2. So we will get the multiply node and change the value to 2. Now we have to clamp it between 0 and 1. By default, it will be minimum 0 and maximum 1. So this is going to be our alpha value in our lerp node. Let's create a lerp node. So A is going to be our color A and B is going to be our color B. Alpha is going to be our clamped value. So let's pull all of these nodes behind lerp. The output of the lerp value is going to be our final color. So once we connect it to the final color, we should get a square gradient. Let's test it out. And ta-da! We have a square gradient. It has yellow over here. I don't know if it's visible, so let's change this to red. Yeah, there you can see it now. So that's perfect. Now let's create one more material. Actually, let's duplicate this and we will call this radial gradient. I forgot to save it. Let me save it. So let's duplicate our square gradient and we will call this radial gradient. There are just a few changes that we need to make. First of all, we don't need the abs node, so we can get rid of that. So we don't even need the mask node. We don't need the max node. Multiply clamp is the same. So after subtracting, we are just going to use the length node. And now we just have to multiply this value to 2 and that should be our radial gradient. There you go. We can see it over here. This is the difference between a radial gradient and a square gradient. That was quick and easy, but wait, before you leave, allow me a few minutes to explain the math over here. Trust me, it's worth it. You will learn how to make these yourself after knowing the theory. So this is our UV map. I have gone the extra mile to mark each pixel with their corresponding UV value. So it's pretty easy to figure out that the midpoint of our UV map is 0.5, 0.5. Since alpha values work in the range of 0 to 1, 0 to 1, we have to convert 0.5, 0.5 to 0 and all of the edges will become 1 and everything in between will become a corresponding value between 0 and 1. For our square gradient, to make the center pixel 0, we take our U and V values and subtract 0.5. This gives us 0, 0 and the new range of the UV map becomes minus 0.5 minus 0.5 over here to 0.5 0.5 over here. Then we use the absolute values and now the new range is from 0, 0 to 0.5 0.5. We get rid of these negative values. Then we use the max node to fetch the higher value. So 0.0 and 0.2, this square over here will return 0.2. 0.4 and 0.2 will return 0.4. And then we multiply this value by 2. Let's take an example pixel point, 0.3, 0.7. First we subtract 0.5, so we get minus 0.2, 0.2. And we use the absolute value to make it 0.2, 0.2. And our max value will be 0.2. We multiply this by 2 and we get the final value 0.4. Let's see how it looks. So this is our UV map of our square gradient. The center pixel is at 0% opacity and it goes up to 100% opacity. At 0.8 it's 80% opacity. So our value at 0.3, 0.7, as we can see, is 0.4. Same way, for our radial map, we take the center pixel, we subtract 0.5 to make it 0, 0, and the new range of UV map is minus 0.5 to 0.5. Then we use the length node to measure the distance from the center, which is 0, 0, and we multiply by 2. So the example pixel point, let's keep it similar, 0.3, 0.7. We subtract to make it minus 0.2 and 0.2, and then we use the length node, which gives us the value 0.283. How does this happen? The formula for length is root under u2 minus u1 whole square plus v2 minus v1 whole square, where u1 and u1 and v1 are the origin, which is 0, 0, and u2, v2 are the pixel which we want to calculate. So for a vector of minus 0.2 and 0.2, the origin is 0, 0, and the length is given by 0.283, which we then multiply and we get this gradient map. 0.566 can be written as 0.57. Let me also zoom out so you can see that the square gradient has kind of an X, which we experimented in our Unreal Editor, and the radial gradient goes round. So let's see how our different versions of square and radial gradient appear. Let's finish with the easiest one, that is our radial gradient with a different center. Everything in this will be the same except the value that we are subtracting. So for the gradient to appear at the center, we had subtracted 0.5. To change it, we are subtracting 0.2. In theory, we can look at our UV map. So if we want to pick a point that we want to make the center, let's say 0.8, 0.6, or let's go with the top right corner. I want to make this as my center. So we have to use this value and subtract this from our x coord node. So we want a value where u and v values are different. So for this, we will have to split our text coord and compute them differently. Let me quickly show it to you. So let's create two masks. We'll duplicate this. We want the R value and we want the G value. We will also duplicate the subtract node. So one subtract goes on the top and one subtract goes on the bottom. We will connect our pins, RG. Now remember, this was 0.9 and this one was 0.1. Now we have to combine these values back together. For this purpose, we have the append node. Append vector. We'll connect our pins and attach this to the length. And there we go. We have the square gradient for 3 colors is a bit tricky. Everything remains the same until the first clamp node. This was our alpha value for 2 colors. But now that we have 3 lerp nodes, lerp AB is for color A and color B. This is our lerp AB. Lerp BC will be for color B and color C. And then we have one more lerp that will combine these both lerps. So from our clamp node, we want to get 3 alpha values. We will get our alpha value for lerp AB by dividing it by 0.5 and clamp. This will be our alpha value for lerp AB. For our lerp BC, we will subtract 0.5, we will divide 0.5 and then clamp it. This is our alpha value for lerp BC. For lerp ABC, we are just using a step function. Anything below 0.5 will be lerp AB and anything above 0.5 will be lerp BC. And that is our 3 color square gradient. For our 3 color radial gradient, everything after the clamp node is going to be the same as our 3 color square gradient. But I did play around with the values and this was to get a black hole effect. So for this, I just messed around with some values. I divided by 20 instead of 0.5, which is a bit too high, but I really wanted this effect. You should definitely play around with the values yourself. You might end up with gradients better than what you imagine. And with that, we have concluded our beginner-friendly gradient series. Let's go make something cool now.